Well, g'day sunshine. Welcome back to GTA Vice City. Because as much as I like to imagine that I'm taking inspiration from Miami, deep down in my soul, but then also deep down in the comment section of my videos, because I know that you guys know that we are essentially building our dream version of the Grand Theft Auto Vice City map. This is a game that came out over 20 years ago now, a game that I sunk so many hours into as a kid, so much so that I've got nostalgia for both growing up in Sydney, but then also life in Miami in the 1980s. Am I alone here? Does anyone else feel the same way? But regardless, I sunk so many hours into this game. And it wasn't even really completing missions. I just spent the majority of the time exploring the map, enjoying what the game developers had created, trying to find hidden gems, places I hadn't explored yet. And even as a young lad, I was just appreciating the layout of the city, where everything was placed, how it all interconnected. And I remember just feeling so inspired by the fact that people actually created this world. But like with all open world maps, you do get to a stage where you've seen everything. There's nothing left to explore. You can't sail off into the sunset and find a whole nother island, which I always tried to do as a kid. No, there comes to a point where you've seen everything and it starts to get a little bit old. And I remember feeling really disappointed. That was it. I'd explored everything, there was nothing left. Which then leads us to present day. If only my kid self could see me now. Now I'm a YouTuber. Well, I guess one of the perks of that is that now I can share my appreciation for how game developers create these open world maps, how it's all interconnected and how these places incorporate all these different aspects of the real life inspiration into a smaller space. We've got a much larger space, much larger than the Vice City map from 2002, and incorporating all those different aspects that I always wish were included in that game, we've got way more possibilities. But that long-winded explanation was really just me saying that this is the most Vice City episode ever. We're going to be making hotels, resorts, a glorious detailed beach, marinas, the super iconic Ocean Drive, and then even some gangs. And look, to all those people that think it's super unoriginal that I'm creating a map in Cities Skylines based on Grand Theft Auto Vice City, it is. I wanted to start with some of the large resorts that we placed down in the last episode. These are all functional, behaving like the resorts do with the Hotels and Resorts DLC, so quite a lot of people are staying here, well at least they should be. At the moment, they're not really functioning that well. There's not really quite enough land value to really be attracting the amount of tourists that we really need to be staying here. So some of the detailed things that we're going to be placing down also need to be attracting more people, such as pools and different features that will be attracting tourists. I also wanted to name some of these places. I like naming all the things within my cities, so if you got some name suggestions, hit me up. Just like some of these people have already been doing. This is the Ross Hotel, replacing the Hilton sign. Once I replaced the signs, I wanted to add a little bit of extra detail to this place because it wasn't really looking that nice. So I decided to add in a bit of a driveway that got people to the front entrance. And then I also wanted to add in some trees and palms, as well as a little bit of parking, which not only looks a whole lot more realistic, but it is also adding in a bit of extra land value, increasing the amount of tourists that will end up staying here. As well as these pools and extra little bits and pieces that I'm placing down, I like to try and add things that are also adding in some functionality, but then also just making the place look a little bit more realistic. But you know, detailing up these places is, it's a lot of work, so I'm only going to be really putting in some minor details here and there with some of these places, but for now, the Ross Hotel looking pretty decent. We also had a strip of some smaller hotels I wanted to give some names to. When I add these names, I also can't help myself but also add the names to the hotels and resorts that are sitting within these buildings, because for me, I really like to see that when I click on civilians and see where they're heading to, I love the fact that it can actually read that they are going to certain hotels and places within the city. I don't know, it just kind of adds a little bit of funness to it. But yeah, these places are losing quite a lot of money, so making a couple of adjustments here and there just to make sure that things will function the way that they should. But we do really need to come back here and add a bit more land value so that tourists will want to stay here a little bit more. At the moment, it's pretty bare bones, but we'll get back here at some stage. When it comes to the detail work for some of these hotels, I just wanted to place down a whole bunch of palm trees, some hedges, and just some clusters of different types of bushes and different types of palm trees. You know, we've also got the banana palms too, which I think look pretty nice, but really we're going for pretty bare bones, you know, and I say bare bones, but really it's just incorporating a bunch of different types of tree types, and then also placing in a bunch of pools and some umbrellas and some seating places as well. And I think just adds just that bit of realism that they really needed. And then I got back to naming some of these hotels, These are all suggestions from you guys from the last episode, and if I don't pick a name that you suggested, then please let me know again in the comment section below, and I'll try and include it down the track, maybe even in a live stream at some stage. And it's always a good idea to let me know which hotel you'd like to name, bit of a description, and then also if you've got an idea for what that hotel is like, then that gives me a good idea of what to place around it, especially if it's nice and quick and simple that I can add, like palms, or even if it's a bit dodgy, a couple of cracks on the pavement always helps. With some of the hotels now detailed up and the place looking a little bit more complete, it was time to add in one of my favorite detail aspects to this whole thing. Because yeah, you guys might suggest the names, but who really owns these hotels? Well, the Sunset City Cuban Mafia does. In fact, a lot of the older businesses around Sunset Beach will be operated and run by the Cuban Mafia, who you'll find sitting on the benches and hanging out the storefronts and driving around in their cars out the front of some of these properties. This has been a long time coming and a long time suggestion from a lot of you guys. I'd love to know a name for the Cuban Mafia, rather than me just calling them the Cuban Mafia. Who are these guys and what do they represent? And a little bit more to these guys, I would always love to know. If you already suggested something, please let me know again, because this is going to be the spot where I'm going to be finding more about these guys. But these actual props, these are made by Sven Berlin, who also created the biker gang who operates down in the Seminole Keys. So we've got two rival gangs operating two different parts of the Seminole state. But I'd love to hear from you guys, how can I use these two gangs to now create different parts of Sunset City? How can they influence the different things they're about to build? A part of the story that's already been suggested is that Franco Miller is one of the head guys of the Mafia, who in fact owns this big mansion that we're going to call a museum, but I think it's more interesting if we call it a mansion. And if someone lives here, well, Franco Miller lives here. He's one of the head guys of the Mafia, owns multiple restaurants around the Seminole State. I think it's more interesting now that it's owned by someone. But if you guys got any other suggestions, let me know. What we're looking at down here is Sunset Beach. This is going to be the most detailed part of all of Sunset City. If not the entire map, this might be the last most detailed place I'm going to do, probably in Cities Skylines 1. I'm calling it right now. Because this is probably my most iconic place within all of Sunset City, so I really wanted to make this place truly feel alive and realistic and really go to town with detailing. So I wanted to start by just placing down some simple trees here and there. This is not as detailed as I'm going to get. Really, these trees are just to fill in some gaps. But even a simple task like that, I'm even making sure that we have planters for these trees to sit on, and I'm also making sure that they are not evenly spaced. I like it when you have these areas of trees along a road that have not such even spacing. You know, you typically have this in real life. You don't just have these perfect spaced trees, you have them in different places sometimes. And sometimes the trees aren't as big and tall as some of the others, so making sure that we are getting rid of some of those to then replace them with trees that are kind of doing wonky and weird things, and even some of them are disappeared. Sometimes these trees die and they don't get replaced. But now it's time to get down to the main drag of Sunset Beach. This is where the big amount of detail is going to go, and I want to make sure that we had some extra hotels that were going to attract more people to this area, so making sure that any building that looked like was a hotel, yeah, it was going to actually function like a hotel. I wanted there to be loads of tables and chairs and awnings and lots of clutter on these streets. This is where a lot of tourists are going to go, where a lot of people are staying, a lot of people are visiting. So I wanted to really represent that by placing down lots and bits and pieces out the front of some of these hotels, turning them into restaurants and turning them into cafes and shops that people can go and shop at. It was then time to go through and add back in the palms. I needed to add in quite a lot of these things because they are so iconic, but then I also wanted to add in some different types of trees nestled into some of these buildings, but then also onto some of the different areas of road that were looking a little bit grey and a little bit bland. Something that I associate with Vice City and with Ocean Drive is that classic Vespa scooter. But unfortunately, I couldn't figure out a way of making it so that that vehicle type was more preferred within Sunset Drive. I just couldn't see a way of doing that. So I figured the next best thing was just to place that prop, that scooter, just against walls and in little parking spaces and against trees and on the road, and that really just captured that Vespa feel, that vibe that I was really going for. I continue to do the same type of treatment with different cars on these spaces. Instead of just having all the parking spots to be functional, I instead made it so that the spacing was a little bit different so that I could place in some more iconic cars into some of these fake spaces, and that worked pretty well. I plopped in some of these super 80s people just on some of these park benches and on some of these tables, and man, that really amped up the 80s feel. Again, thank you Sven Berlin for creating these. I went pretty berserk with all the detail work, placing in so many different decals and placing in different types of buskers and billboards and just everything that I felt like really captured that 80s vibe, really just showed how much of this place was inspired by Vice City, and I went a little crazy with the detail, I'm not gonna lie. These are some of my most detailed areas. And after all that, I was feeling pretty good with how things were starting to look during the day. But what about at night? Because this is Sunset Beach. When the sun goes down, this place is really meant to come alive. The lights come out, people come out. It's a real scene down here, but at the moment, it's just kind of bright. Kind of not really alright. So I decided to turn down the lights a bit by changing the lights on the roads. By changing, I mean getting rid of them. And then even just turning some of these buildings into procedural objects. Some of these buildings, when you do that, the lights just dim a bit, and some of them get rid of them completely, which was good because I wanted to add my own lights. One of the biggest suggestions that I've been getting for this area is to add neon lights. And of course, that is one of the most iconic and biggest parts about Miami Beach. And it's also one of those super iconic things with Vice City. I think it's one of the opening scenes is those neon lights on this strip. And I always knew I was going to do this. I always had a really good idea of what I was going to do when it came to this. And I'm gonna be completely honest here. This is not gonna work at all. Not in the slightest. And I don't often admit defeat, but I was completely defeated with this. Not only was adding neon lights just so tedious and so annoying and so fiddly, especially when I grabbed these super tiny ones. Oh man, these ones were so painful to use. I just could not get the lights to work how I imagined. So many times I would grab something from the Steam Workshop and then jump back into the game, taking so long to load up this game, by the way, just to have it not work or not turn out how I wanted it to. Not to mention the weird buggy look that I get when I'm flying around this city at night. And after playing Cities Skylines 2 and seeing how great the lights are with that, yeah, this actually just doesn't work. So after all of this, we're not gonna do neon lights. I'm sorry guys, but this is just so painful and so annoying, and I give up. I'm not gonna do it. Unfortunately, neon lights are just not gonna happen. Even these blue ones that I'm placing down that look like they're working, when I load back up the save, they all sink to the floor. So, you know, quite often I say in my videos, if I hit a roadblock, hey guys, let me know what I can do differently and we'll revisit this area. Not today, my friends. And not even tomorrow. This ain't gonna happen. But I did place down some more mafia guys. These guys look pretty cool, but the blinding white light, yeah, wasn't quite as nice. But they are down here. We do have some mafia guys just hanging out the front of some of these places, which is kind of nice. But as far as having these neon lights on these buildings, forget about it. Let's get back to this sunny beach. This is actually going to work. Not just work, but look fantastic. Because at the moment, this functional beach that I placed down earlier, it wasn't really working out. I didn't like these cars that were parked here, so I decided to get rid of it, and instead I'd make my own one. But I wanted it to be functional, don't you worry. I wanted to see people actually making the trip out this way to actually go to our beach. I'm adding in these great seafoam decals. These are absolutely amazing. And when you pair them up with these actual functional waves that come in and out of the beach, these are made by Ronix. These are some of the best assets when it comes to creating a functional beach. This just adds so much to this area, and I just placed them down everywhere. I placed them down everywhere. To make this beach actually functional, I want to place down these invisible parks. These will attract people to the beach, making it so that people will actually want to come and visit, increasing the land value, and also making it so that people want to stay here. When paired with some beach details like some umbrellas and a little bit of seaweed within the ocean, the beach was starting to look pretty nice and detailed. But there was one area that was still looking pretty bare bones. Because this sea break, I really wanted this to feel pretty special, being heart and center of the city, and then also being one of the main focal points, especially when you're flying in from this angle. So I really wanted to make this thing pretty detailed, but then also function like a park. So you are going to be seeing a lot of people hanging out around here, visiting some of the different sites, going to the beach, walking along the sea break, which is pretty cool, but then also visiting some of the historical sites around here. Because that's the thing, I was feeling like at this stage that we were seeing a lot of, well, sort of modern types of places around Sunset Beach. I know we are in the 80s, but it did feel a little bit too modern for my liking. Felt like we needed to have a bit of a throwback to some more of the historical sites that would have been built here when the place was first established. So we do actually have a couple of older villas. That bigger one on the right, I'm imagining is a resort, and in fact I am turning it into a resort, whereas that smaller one I think is probably more of a historical museum that is probably doing some sort of exhibits about the area, or even maybe an art gallery, something like that. It's a park at this stage, so people are visiting it, which is pretty nice. People are visiting all these sites around here, walking along the path and going to the tennis courts. This whole area, it's turning out pretty nice. I also want to place down another villa within the heart of Sunset Beach. So this one here is, I'm pretty sure this one's actually from Thailand or something. It's a bit more obscure, but I think it's a pretty cool design. It actually kind of fits in with the area too. It's big enough to be an apartment block that could hold probably multiple families, but I'm imagining that just one person lives here, or maybe just one family, not multiple. And then for the block on the other side of the road, I found this little corner store, which I thought was a pretty good fit. But with that, this area was looking pretty well detailed and pretty well finished. Unfortunately though, the other side of Sunset Beach, the less desired area, the space that I didn't really know what to do with, it was looking a little bit sad. But the thing is, this area in Miami Beach, it's just not that well photographed. Present day, I can just jump onto Google Earth and get a pretty good idea of what this area looks like, but for the 1980s, it's a little bit harder. So trying to get a good idea, a good sense based on these pictures is a bit tricky. So I decided to go just a little bit rogue, but just a little bit. Because using Google Earth, I could get a smidge of an idea of some of the buildings that were built pre-1980s or during the 1980s. And I could see that some of these hotels, some of these resorts, and some of these apartments were in fact probably, maybe, potentially built around that time or before that time. But it's definitely not quite at the degree of buildings that you see present day. You know, Miami's getting pretty built up. A lot of these apartments, a lot of these high rises exist today, but I really love the 1980s Miami. Hence the reason why I'm building this way. So going into this build, I wanted it to be a bit of a mix of apartments, maybe some hotels, but there would also be quite a lot of parking lots and also a little bit of industry, just a little hint of industry. But then also creating a bit of a marina, because we didn't really have any marinas at this stage on this side, and I felt like we needed that. Plus, marinas featured so heavily in Vice City that I did feel like we needed to place something like this around this area, so this makes sense. I established a little bit of parking for a marina. There's nothing that special going on down here. My technique for parking lots when it comes to detail work has probably gone downhill. There's nothing wrong with this, but I just feel like I'm not putting as much effort into parking these days. And you know what? You could probably make the same argument when it comes to building a marina, because I am just essentially copy and pasting something I've already built. But you know what? These things are kind of tedious to build, and I've already got a very good template of what a marina looks like, so I've just copied and pasted it, and I'm going to tailor it for this area. Because that's the thing, this space is kind of tight. We actually have a cruise ship terminal not too far away, so I do need to leave enough space so that a cruise ship can just safely cruise by here. And I also wanted this to feel somewhat functional. I wanted to see some sort of boats coming out of this marina so that it did actually feel like a functioning marina, that boats and people were actually using it. And not just that, I actually wanted to see people using it in terms of land value. I wanted this to be adding more land value to this area because Sunset Beach is a very nice space, and I really wanted to make sure that people were feeling the benefits of having things like marinas and parks and historical sites and just the beach right next door. You know, I want this place to feel truly nice. For the design of this marina, I'm kind of taking inspiration from the marina that actually sits in this very location in Miami Beach. You know, this makes sense. This is the same sort of style and same sort of fit. So I felt like this was pretty cool. It's definitely unique. And I do love that we do have these keys that kind of sit here. I guess they're kind of like sea breaks that make it so that the water on the inside of the marina isn't too rocky for the boats that are sitting amongst here. We do have some pretty nice boats that are sitting here. I wanted to make sure that we were placing down some super yachts and some boats that were definitely owned by some of the people that had a little bit more money around here. I mean, this is a place that, especially in Sunset City, There's a bit of wealth. A lot of people have some nice stuff. So I wanted to make sure that we did actually show that by placing down some pretty nice boats and some features that definitely adds to that. It was then time to make this thing actually work. I'm placing down one of these boat spawners. These are absolutely fantastic. I really hope someone creates a mod like this in Cities Skylines 2. It's probably gonna be a while until they do this, but this is basically making it so that boats will spawn here and I am able to draw a path using the same mechanics as the fishing line. This is basically making a park version of that so that we are able to draw a path for these boats to come in and out and actually use the marina just like a marina would use. I mean, these are the sort of tools that we are absolutely going to miss in Cities Skylines 2 because it's going to be a while until we see things like fishing industry being introduced and mechanics that we have in Cities Skylines 1 that so many DLCs introduced and so many modders have just taken those ideas and extended them. Even things like creating parks and creating park districts is something I do so often, and I'm really going to miss that in Cities Skylines 2. Cities Skylines 2 is going to really change the game, but oh man, I am going to miss some of these things. But I also see a world where I'm going to be playing a lot of Cities Skylines 1. At least for the beginning stages of Cities Skylines 2, but Cities Skylines 1 and 2 I think are going to go hand in hand for at least a year or so. What do you guys reckon about that? I truly believe that. The last thing I wanted to do was add in a bit of industry on Sunset Beach. Nobody around here wanted to see this, but it felt like it needed to be done. And with that, Sunset Beach, guys, is looking pretty well done. Well, at least this little section. For now. My friends, thank you all so much for watching today's episode of Sunset City. What a big detail episode. What a meaty one. I mean, this took a really long time to put together. I'm kind of a bit over detailing this stage. I think I might have hit my limit in terms of detail work. At least for now, Cities Skylines 2 won't be as detail heavy at this stage, at least for a while, so I'll probably jump back into Cities Skylines 1 and do some detail work. I can see that happening. But in terms of this episode, does anyone else have super nostalgia for Vice City? Am I just showing my age? I know I said I was a kid, but I was more of a teenager when this game came out. I played a lot of this game, super nostalgia for it. Anyone else? Maybe I'm alone. I'm sure I'm not. Also, sorry it's taken so long to get to these gangs. I know I announced doing this ages ago and I'm only just getting to it now. It just takes so long to do anything in Cities Skylines 1. I'm kind of looking forward to a bit of a change in pace when it comes to Cities Skylines 2 content. I think we're going to be doing less detail work and more city expansion, and I'm all for it. But a big shout out to Sven Berlin for creating these. I mean, he is the master behind it all, so big shout out to him. Really, really appreciate it. And a big shout out to you guys for watching, and a big shout out to my patrons for supporting the channel and making videos like this possible. I am Ali, Lancis Man, Jamie, Shira, Starlight Princess, James Thomas, Jose Ramiro, Stuart Coates, Bill Reuter, Dot Comma, and Orla. Cheers legends, and I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya!